Oh, when does a joke become a dad joke?
When it has a joke kid.
During the delivery, it becomes apparent.
That's good.
Hey, I found his dad!
I think Dad has made some excellent progress today.
Your dad, he's a fun guy, right?
And I love him so much, and I think he's the greatest dad in the world.
Everybody,
Welcome
welcome.
back. There you go.
Yeah,
I was waiting for you.
yeah. Sorry, it took a minute. I think it might be my internet connection. Anyway, welcome back to the second episode of season 3 of Working on the Dad Pod. As always, I'm Ethan. This is Alex. Please remember to like and subscribe on YouTube. That is the best way to grow our audience. As we mentioned last week during our season finale, which was definitely last week from when I'm speaking to you right now, we mentioned that we were going to revisit an old episode from an old topic from a previous season on working on not bringing it home. Now, what is it? We will get into what it is, but I think we all know what it is, but we will get there. And, you know, so I kind of just want to get into it really because this topic was really important to me because as I tried to not speak about it so much during our last episode, the premiere, a lot has happened to me in the last 4 months, but it has all been surrounding my job. I don't think I've kept it a secret from all of you millions of listeners that I work for the federal government, which was always something I was very proud of. I enjoyed public service. It's what I've wanted to do since I've been a emotionally mature adult in my mind. There's a lot of stuff that I was legally an adult for that I still consider my youth, but ever since I became who I am today, I've loved public service. One of the pros of public service is that it has always been honest, good, and stable work. And if you have been following the news, you may be aware that that has not been the case lately, ever since Inauguration Day. It's been really, really tough. The balance of when am I at work and when am I at home, the lines have blurred quite a bit. And, it kind of feels like I'm always at work because there's always something on my mind. And that's really why I wanted to talk about it today. I'm going to try to be not super specific, but vague enough and make it inclusive. We all have bad days at work. Everybody has a tough job, no matter what industry they're in. I'm going to kick it to Alex in a minute to just talk about how he's able to mentally divide there and here, whether that's work and home or, just any other form of there and here. But yeah, this is something that I've been struggling with for quite a while, and why it's taken me personally a while to get us back on the air. So I do want to take this opportunity to just say sorry for the 4 month delay, but this is a podcast that makes me really happy to do with Alex, and it's a lot of fun. And because of my stresses at work, I have not been allowing myself to enjoy the things that I normally enjoy. And that's not healthy for anyone, especially the millions of you listeners who have been yearning for our faces. So,
Yeah.
what's up with you, man?
Yeah. So, first of all, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that it's stressful. As you mentioned, right, everybody has work stress. And I think that's where we wanted to direct this episode a little bit, because hopefully there are things from our experiences, the generalities or specifics of what we can and can't get into, that you can take with you. Because whether you are, maybe you work the night shift because that is when you can get paid the most, or when you can get shifts that are available, maybe you're new at your job And maybe that makes you really tired when you see your kids at breakfast because you're just walking in the door and all you want to do is sleep. Or maybe you work odd hours, maybe you have multiple jobs because that's what it's taking to put food on the table and a roof over your head. Or the example I used to Ethan in the chat, maybe you're something like a doctor or a surgeon and you lose a patient and you have to go home and look at your kids that same day. I mean, imagine if you were a pediatric surgeon and you lose a kid and then you go home and see your own, how blurred those lines can be. But I think no matter where you fall on that spectrum, and even if your job in definition is not tough because you didn't fall into one of those categories, you can still have tough days, right? Maybe you have a great that you love and not every day. I mean, before the things that have transpired that have made every day tough for you, I know you had tough days, even when the job was good and you would describe it as such. And so I think whether it's it's acute or chronic bad days, bring it home can be tough. And one of the biggest reasons, I looked at some studies, and I'll try to make sure I cite these, but there are studies that show that the stress, and this probably wouldn't surprise anybody, but the stress that you bring home can affect your partner and it can affect your kids. It can increase depression and anxiety among kids when the mental health of the parent is not there. And unfortunately, in today's day and age, like, work can be one of the biggest barriers to good mental health because of what is required of us. You mentioned the very fact, and this is something that I sort of mulled over, the very fact that, like, the lines are blurred. I think back to when we were kids and our parents were working. They maybe had cell phones when we were in elementary school, middle school, but those cell phones didn't. My cell phone has my work email, has my work task manager, has my work, messaging system, has like my HR app, like whatever I need from work, I can get a decent chunk of it just from this phone that I also play the New York Times crossword on, right? It's not, that line is super blurred. The thing that entertains me, that you may be watching this very podcast on your YouTube app, can also be your work device where a ton of things get done. These phones right here are more powerful than the space shuttle that landed on the moon, right? And so it does make it really hard sometimes to turn it off, because I think about how our parents didn't have that. They might have to work late sometimes. They might have to go in early sometimes. They might have to work extra days sometimes. But it wasn't even really until I was in high school that the technology progressed to the point where, like, let's say I was homesick, my mom had the ability to, like, virtual desktop into her work computer, which was a physical desktop itself, and get any work done. If she was out, she was out. Working from home was a lot harder, and it became more mainstream when we got in high school, or more possible. And then obviously with the COVID pandemic, it became extremely commonplace. Personally, right. I worked in an office since 2013 for 12 years, whether it's through running the business that we had together, whether it's through working for 3 different corporations for full-time jobs. I haven't had to be in an office. And so it does make those lines really, really tough. And I think managing the stress is one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves, our kids, and our partners, if at all possible.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good primer. And the stress management has been the hardest part for me. And the reason the lines are so blurred is, even though my work-life balance has changed immensely, you're listening to this on Friday, March 21st, but we are recording this on Thursday, March 13th. What's happening in today's world is, this is my first week of full-time return to office, which I did every day before up until the pandemic began. But for me, this is my first experience being a full-time commuter while a dad. And as I've mentioned before, the nature of my wife's job, she is out the door and pretty much getting to her office usually before our kids are awake. So it's daddy duties in the morning, but now I have to every day I am responsible to not just get them to school and then I can just get home and get right to work, but I now have to commute to work in an environment where things happen. It's a metro system, it's public transit. The other day, I was on the platform waiting to get on as the train came, and there were people waiting to get off the train, and then the doors never opened, and the train kept going. I felt worse for the people who wanted to get off at my stop, but it was really annoying that now my commute was just delayed 5 minutes because for some reason they didn't announce the train was gone. And all I could think about was, I really hope that the work that I am doing on my phone on the metro is counted, because if it's not, then I'm going to miss dinner every night. And, I never expected to be a dad that wasn't around to have dinner with his kids. And, as you mentioned, Alex, there's some detail I can get into, some detail I can't, because as with the millions of you who listen to this, I'm pretty sure the two people in the White House are definitely our most avid father listeners. So, that I don't want to say too much that could get me in trouble, but it is right. So but anyway, where I ended up going off on a bit of a tangent, but what I wanted to say, what makes it so hard as a blurred line, is that everybody around me is also a part of this, because the federal government is the industry of the town. This would be as if like there was a mine that had an accident in West Virginia. Everybody in that town would be talking about it. For us, everybody either works for the government, is a contractor with the government, or is with somebody who works for the government. When my mom visited last week, she goes, I don't know if you know about me, but I tend to eavesdrop. And I said, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure that's been your entire identity my whole life. But she goes, everybody is talking about this. Every single person I've listened to is talking about what's going on.
Sure.
And it's just, we were at gymnastics, and I see people who, it's like, what's going on at your agency? What's going on at your agency? Do you still have a job? Do you still have a job? And there's really no way around it. And it is, the stress is unbearable to manage, because I literally can't get away from it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like before people introducing their pronouns became more commonplace. That's what it felt like whenever I would go visit you in DC, where somebody would say, hey, I'm so-and-so and I work this. Like they would mention some 3-letter thing, some initialism or acronym. And I would be like, that's cool. I don't know what that means, but I'm proud of you, man. Like, and it felt cliquey at the time, but it also is just like a tight knit community of like people, the government is sort of its own thing. And I think a lot of people don't understand all the little facets of it. I think there are a lot of people with a lot of thoughts. I know there are a lot of people with a lot of thoughts who don't understand everything. I would probably count myself among that, along with plenty of other random people of voting age in this country.
Sure.
And so I can imagine, I mean, on a much smaller scale, it's sort of like how I grew up. My mom when I grew up, she worked almost all of my childhood at Duke University. And in Durham, North Carolina, there are other businesses. It's not quite as pervasive, but there's not a lot of other businesses. If you go back there at this point, every doctor's office is now part of the Duke Health system, right? The university is sort of everywhere and everything in that town. And then my dad lived 20 minutes away in Chapel Hill, still does. And UNC is very much the same way in that other city, where it's like almost expected that you work at one of those places. Where my mom worked at Duke, my stepmom worked at UNC. My dad, he didn't work at either of those places, but he had both as clients for the business he served, like for the business he did, right, at various points. And so it just becomes very pervasive. And I get it on a smaller level, right? Just how much something like that, if, you know, the university stopped existing or decided they were going to do something as drastic as the federal government has decided to do, how much it would throw a much smaller town or towns into chaos, let alone really large metropolitan area like DC. So you asked me earlier how I sort of separate things, and I didn't really answer that. I talked about some studies and stuff, and I was actually talking about this with my therapist the other day, because things I mentioned in the last episode have made this spring really stressful, right? My wife, up until recently, you know, she had gotten a new job, but she was working, and she had she had a full-time job and some side gigs, and then she went to part-time and picked up more side gigs. And so she was like, okay, I'm going to fill all these hours and do 40 hours a week, juggling all these different things. She was trying to get back out of personal training, more back into the marketing space, which she's successfully done. But after a month or two, she sort of looks up and looks at her hours and goes, I have 60 hours worth of work every week. Like, I've told this client I'll do 10, this client I'll do 20, this client I'll do 10, you know, and this client I'll do 20. And all of a sudden, I got 60 hours of work that I'm committed to each week. And so that made it kind of stressful. She was working a lot of nights. She would be out here in this office working. She would be out early in the morning. She would be working a lot of weekends. We go to church fairly regularly, and it was just me taking the kids. And it was people going, where's your wife? Where's your wife? And I'd be like, well, she's got to work. She got work to do. And people would understand, but it's still just like a lot of like, and it put stress on me because, one, I was worried about her. I was worried about her emotionally. Like, how long can she keep this up? It feels unsustainable. I was worried about myself emotionally, because I can be a solo dad, but there wasn't a lot of reprieve. And then compound that with this spring in my job, we started in on what I would consider is the biggest project that I've ever worked on in terms of a like impact on a business money ratio, you know, and I don't have to be as coy as you. I am a web designer, and we are redesigning the website for the company that I work for. And it is a really big deal because it touches a lot of things and deals with a lot of money and a lot of people. And so it is many, many meetings a week on top of my normal job. And I'm supposed to be keeping my normal tasks that were a 40-hour-a-week job afloat while putting out fires related to this project, of which I am the lead. And we have a team of like 20 people working on, and they're all coming to me for insights and advice or thoughts or documentation or whatever that I have to do on top of that job. And so I have to find time to do that. I have to find time to sort of be super dad while my wife is juggling everything. And somewhere in there, I'm supposed to find time to relax and unwind for myself. And one of the few things I did was that I got an Xbox. And then I got to the point where like, I was like, I can play Xbox a little bit, play some football. But I realized before we did this episode that I was like, man, I haven't touched that thing in at least a month. You know, just because like I've actually I don't want to say not had time. I had to make the decision to not do that so I could focus on going to bed. Because
Right.
I was like, what I really came down to is like, I felt like I was almost at a breaking point. I couldn't take it anymore. And I said, what can I control? Because that has been the biggest thing when I'm feeling a lot of anxiety. That was one of the first lessons I learned when I started going to therapy of like, when you are feeling anxious and out of control something. Find what you can control and control that. And I said, it's really hard for me. I've admitted that I have ADHD, and like getting to bed on time and being regular with that is very tough for me and for others. And it's not an excuse, but I tried to make a commitment to myself of like, I am going to get more sleep. I'm going to go to bed regularly, and I'm going to wake up at the same time every day. And I'm going to try and make this a thing, because if I don't go to bed, I'm tired, I'm cranky, I'm less productive, I show up less for my kids, and every little thing that is bugging me is magnified. And so I'm going to try to do that. And on top of that, and we can get into more of that, but it's like on top of that, during the holidays, I gained some weight. And I wanted to, get my diet back on track. I wanted to get my sleep back on track. I wanted to get my mobility back on track. My job's not feeling great. My relationship with my wife, like we're not on the rocks or anything like that, but we're not having a lot of time for us. And, like my kids, I feel like I'm almost stage managing them sometimes, and not like getting any one-on-one time to like enjoy it. And I'm like, huh. And I sort of just exhale and I go, when is this gonna end? Is this just what life is for the foreseeable future? And I've just got to grin and bear it. And it kind of got a little grim there of just like, something's got to change. And my wife getting this new job, I think has lessened some of that, right? She's able to be, around on the weekends. But we added the redoing the bathroom thing, which kind of dominated our weekends. And so it was just sort of like, man, I thought this was going to get better. My wife's only been in the job for less than 2 weeks now, full time. So it's not been a lot of time. We're done with the bathroom now, and I'm sort of excited to see where things go and see how this does. But to answer the question, I don't think I was doing. I was trying my best and putting all of my effort into separating that stress from my kids, and I thought I was nailing it. And then one day, my daughter, she comes home 3 days a week, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. I bike to school. I get her. We bike back. She hangs out at the house for the afternoon. She's chosen that over going to the Y, entertaining herself, reading books, whatever. And she's chosen that. And then one day she just draws me a picture and brings it to me at my desk after I get off a meeting. And it is a giant flame. And it says, everything is fine. And just hands it to me. And like, I was about to burst into tears because I'm like, she hears me. I'm in the living room. I'm behind a curtain. Like, I'm not that hidden from the world here. Like, I shut myself off, and I have noise canceling headphones here that I use. And so I shut myself off from the world, but everybody else can hear me. And I kind of forget about that. And I always think that she's just off doing her own thing, listening to her, Amazon Echo or whatever she's doing, reading a book and not paying any attention. And she brings me this, and I'm like, she can tell that I'm stressed just from the way I'm sounding on some of these meetings about different things. Yeah. So I'm clearly not doing the job I thought I was.
Yeah, that's I'm close to tearing up too, because my daughter, the older one, she's similarly will draw pictures and say, this is a picture of you and me, and it says Go Miami on it, and she goes, this is for your office. And she's been really into decorating my office. And yesterday she says to me, hey Daddy, look, I picked these rocks for you at the playground. I really love them, but I want you to have them at your office because you now have to go every day. And I swallowed took a breath, and I said, "Sweetheart, thank you so much, but I'm actually going to take stuff home from my office tomorrow," which I did today because, I didn't want any of the stuff, the pictures she drew me that I've been decorating on my wall, to be in a building that I could possibly be locked out of. Like some of my colleagues, Net Education and USAID, and everything that matters to me is out of that office. It's going to be a very dull and boring place to go for as long as I can be there. But the last thing I ever wanted was to know I couldn't get to something she made me. And it's really taking a toll, not just on her, but also my 2.5-year-old turned to me yesterday morning as we were getting ready for school. I set them up for breakfast. I pack up the bags. I make sure all lunches are good to go. And, I poked my head out of the kitchen to check on them. And she turns to me, she holds her waffle, and she just goes, "Daddy, I don't want you to go to the office anymore." Because even though it doesn't actually impact her day, she knows that something is different. And I think it's because she realizes that I'm not there at pickup anymore. Because it used to be I dropped off, my wife and I would pick up together. But if my wife waited for me, we might get called because school got closed or was closed, right? Because, one missed metro train, I'm not going to be there by 6. And it's and that amplifies to, well, I'm not home to make sure that dinner's prepped. So right when we pick the girls up, we can just cook it because neither of us are home anymore. And it's really, I don't want to harp on all these things that I was able to do around the house that I quote unquote was not supposed to do because I was working. But, we're all adults here. You can be on a phone call and listen and take something out of the freezer to thaw without wasting taxpayer dollars. Let's just be totally honest here. And, to have everything that's being said about me and my colleagues, and with the true fact that we're in a situation where, even if it's simply a talking point, and without getting into too much detail, you went through this once, but, layoffs are not supposed to be the first thing that a company wants to do. You're supposed to at least say, we're going to do everything we can to avoid a reduction in force. Yet I've got people saying, you're worthless and we just think AI is better than you and we're just going to cut your job if we can. And I've seen a lot of friends lose their jobs in the last 6 weeks. I've seen just reckless decisions being made that impact a lot of people, not just those workers, but everybody they serve. And I don't remember feeling this broken and worthless in a long time. Because the hardest part is that the rules keep changing, the goalposts keep moving. I am doing everything in my limited power to try to save not just my own job, but other people's jobs. And when I get right up to the finish line, I'm told, sorry, that's not going to work, because I keep forgetting in my efforts that the goal is actually not to let me help. And I can't stop trying because people are relying on me, even though that's only in my mind. Like, everybody knows I can't help. Everybody who I am trying to help knows I can't help. But I can't just sit back. And
Yeah.
I come home and, you know, I don't want to just tell my kids, yeah, why don't you watch an episode of Daniel Tiger while I figure out. But I kind of need them to have this screen time right now because I am mentally not there to be the best dad I can be. And my time with them is so much less than it has been. And I hate actively choosing to not spend it with them because I don't want them to see this lesser version of me. And
Yeah.
that is just another way this is all blurred because I'm now letting who I am as a worker determine the choices I am making as a parent. But even as I say it out loud, trying to convince myself that what I've been doing was wrong, it might actually be the right choice if I'm not able to give them my best self.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I try to remind myself that everything's a season, right? And I think while we've highlighted that we've been having some similar feelings, or at least there's a middle to the Venn diagram, they're also like drastically different, right? Like I feel insanely valued at my workplace, both like emotionally, freedom. Like I had to miss some, or somebody was asking me if I could move this for a website meeting, right? And I was just transparent with a coworker, and I was like, "Hey, listen, I'm going over an educational plan with my daughter's school at that time. I decided instead of just being like, no, I can't miss it. I was like, I'm just going to say what it is, right, and not be vague, and move the meeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm able to bike and go get my daughter every day after school, like you were able to get your kids before you had to go back in the office. My emotional support's there. The monetary support has been reflected in annual reviews and things like that as well. And so I don't have a lot of like right now it's a lot of work, and I'm gaining a lot of good skills and skills that I can use in this job or in future parts of my career. And I'm really thankful for it. And I'm just like, it's a lot. It's a lot. Like we have a new bathroom. My wife has a new job. Like we are in a good financial position, and like everything's better. And I am starting to see the other side of it. And so that sort of goes back where I'm going with this is like back to my original point of like bringing it home with you doesn't have to mean that you're in Ethan's situation or my situation. You could sort of be on any end of the spectrum, and you can feel like burnt out and done and not having the energy to be the best dad you can be, right? And so it does kind of come in all forms. One thing I did mention when I was talking about the Xbox was the sleep and controlling what I can control. And I'm not, preaching this to Ethan, but to anybody listening that's sort of going through stress, that controlling what you can control. I made a decision that I was like, okay, this is tough mentally. If I make things tough physically, it's not going to be better. Like I am going to then be frustrated mentally, and the mental stress is going to be added to by like if I'm not taking care of myself. So I'm like, I'm going to keep going to the gym, right? I talked about how I have worked it into my schedule to the point where it's non-negotiable right now because I have to take my son to the gym to get him out of my wife's hair so I can work out, and then I can get to work, but I've got to drop him off and all those different things. So I did that, and I was like, I'm going to, make sure I eat right. I've tracked my calories we're not going to do a working on the dad bod segment. At least I don't think this week. We're going to wait until episode 3. I think Ethan wants a little time to show off his Arnold Schwarzenegger physique, but I've made sure to eat right. I've tried to sleep more. or at least adequately every night, right? More than I had been in late 2024. And I've tried to exercise, and I was like, I can control those things. Why wouldn't I do these things? Okay, time, energy, and effort. Well, if I sleep enough, I'm going to have enough energy to go to the gym. I started figuring out some other hacks. We'll talk about this in the Working on the Dad Bod segment that we do next time we do it. But, some different ways to make healthy meals either ahead of time, make them easy, use Ethan's new best friend, AI, to like help along the way. But have things grab and go. And frankly, like my wife's new job has come with a pay increase. And so we get takeout a little bit more. Like I mentioned, we get Jimmy John's every Monday, and Jimmy John's isn't breaking the bank, but we also got takeout tonight. And so we used to cook more meals at home, but I am like asking my wife at 3:00, like, hey, what are we doing for dinner tonight? And then I'm going online and I'm taking 5 minutes and looking up the nutritional facts of any chain restaurant we might go to. And then I'm pre-selecting what I want and taking those 5 minutes to go, that's what I'm going to get. So that my decision making, I'm not getting something in the moment that is maybe 800 calories more than what I should be eating, or understanding my portions and pre-logging my food and all that kind of stuff. And so by controlling the controllables, it has helped sort of not push me over that edge. And it's not gonna make the world of difference for everybody or everything. And I also get that when you're stressed, when you have to commute all of a sudden and fit it into what was already a tight schedule, that like exercise is, who's got time for that? Because I mean, getting enough sleep, eating right, cooking good meals, being there with your kids, exercising, like, let me know when there's 28 hours in the day, right? Like, and this is not me sitting here going, everybody should start doing 30 minutes of cold plunge and have a 20-minute stretching routine and go to the sauna and resistance train and run and like do all these like body optimization kind of things. But taking one of those things, maybe start with sleep or with eating right, and like try to master that for a month, and then add in the next thing, you'll feel just a little bit more in control. And then it can sort of have a snowball effect on like the amount of control you're feeling in such a chaotic situation.
Yeah. It's funny, everybody I've worked with, we're all talking, and every single one of them has lost 10 pounds thanks to stress. I'm the only one who's gaining more than 10 pounds thanks to stress. Why? I know. Why am I the stress eater? Why can't I be one of these stress starvers? I feel like that would just be a lot better for me. No, I'm sure it comes with its own issues, but I will say, now that I have to be in the office every day and I must fill the time specific in like certain ways, there is a gym at my agency, and it is only $12 a pay period to be a member of. So I strategically waited till today when I saw what the shutdown plan was for my agency should the government not be funded after tomorrow night. I learned that the traditional non-annually appropriated funded agencies, and I know that was a lot of government jargon, but basically the money that finances the agency I work for is not annual money. It comes from what they call the National Highway Trust Fund. So they don't need to pass a budget for me to go to work. And because of that, I know that I'm going to be in the office on Monday. So I got in my paperwork to join that gym.
Yeah.
And not that I'm advertising that I'm going to be working less next week, but when a number of agencies that you normally collaborate with are going to be not operating, the actual workload you're and time commitments throughout your day are going to decrease, because that is just how that works. And so hopefully that means next week, while I'm stuck in the building, I will have time to exercise a little bit more. So,
Nice. That's
you know,
awesome.
trying to find any silver lining I can. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you know, I think to sort of put a bow on this, because we've talked about our personal things and we've talked about what you can do. I think finding pockets of time with intentionality is super important, because just as we talked about how our office can essentially be in our pocket at all times, so can dopamine hits, scrolling social media, right? Whether you're someone who likes to watch TikTok, Instagram Reels, whether you're someone who likes to scroll Twitter, whether you're someone who likes to, death scroll the news, doom scroll the news, whatever it is, play games on your phone. No judgments, but it isn't actually as restorative, I think, as a lot of people think. And so finding 5 minutes to do something not in front of a screen, especially if your job involves being in front of a screen all day, finding something, even if that's, let's say you're a person who drives to work, or maybe you take public transit or whatever, but popping in some headphones and like listening to some music or something, but like 5-minute meditation, right? If you have a smartwatch, a lot of them have like a breathing app or something, but doing something to clear your mind, get yourself in control. And those can be really good ways to sort of set the boundary, right? I have to do this. I mentioned that my office is in the living room. I'm essentially behind a curtain, like the Wizard of Oz. And I pick a time when I'm going to be done, usually right around 5. But I treat that curtain like the physical and emotional and mental barrier, that like work stops here. And I walk out and then I'm done, right? I take a minute, I collect myself, and then I walk like out of the office, and like a switch sort of flips for me and I go into dad mode. But I've spent a couple minutes thinking about, I'm not doing the mindfulness thing that I just suggested. I'm actually going, okay, what do I need to do this evening? What does the evening look like? What's going to be going on? And therefore, I've spent the time sort of plotting it out, not to the exact degree. I've got little kids. Nothing's going to go to some big plan, but like, okay, I'm getting up, I'm getting ready, I'm heading over to the Y to meet my son and my mother-in-law for basketball practice. Or, okay, I'm getting up, I'm making dinner, we're going to do that. Dinner on the table here. That means we're going to have about an hour block before bedtime. Okay, what's something I could do with the kids? Take a couple minutes to think about like something that would stop them from asking for screen time or whatever. Like, could we play Candyland or something easy? And I kind of just pre-plan it with, 2 to 3 minutes. And during that short little period, when I walk out of that curtain, that is sort of how I reset. And I think if you're on a train, in your car, however you're getting to and from work, if you have a separate room in the house that's your office, whatever it is, like create that barrier, that line on the carpet, whatever it needs to be. It's like, I walk over this threshold and I'm dad. And that works for me. And that may be totally bogus for everybody else. And I got a weird little brain that works that way, but so far so good. And I get that that's tough for everybody, because I can imagine that when you're in a stressful situation and your boss emails you and you think, if I don't respond to this, I'm risking my income. That can be tough. And I understand that there's privilege that comes with it, that like my boss has kids around the same age as my kids. Some of my coworkers do as well. And the ones that don't totally understand and they get it. And everybody respects those boundaries. If I get a Teams message after hours, it says this can wait until tomorrow 85% of the time. And I get that not everybody gets that. So there's some of that I'm not going to sit there and go, everybody can just do this. You just got to try harder. Like if your boss emails you and is expecting a response at 9:30 p.m., like, yes, you should look for a different job. But at the same time, like that's not a light switch that you can just turn on and go, well, I'm just going to get a different job tomorrow and I'll just be in a different job. And that's just it. Like it's that simple. You know, that's like saying, I'm just going to lose weight. Like, yeah, it takes time. So you got to figure out how you're surviving that day.
Sounds like you got yourself one of those little severance chips. I got to get me one of those. So.
Yeah, it's not quite that great because I do with this big project. I do sometimes log on after hours to get a few things done. Right, being out of the office essentially for the next 9 work days after tomorrow has me all sorts of stressed.
Sure.
Trying to get ahead on some things. So, we'll see. Yeah. We'll see how it goes. But I encourage anybody that is out there looking for a job and you find yourself lucky enough to be getting interviews, talking to companies, try to ask some questions around work-life balance. Having experienced both ends of the spectrum in my life, I can say confidently now, and again, maybe coming from a place of privilege, but I can say confidently now that I would take a pay cut for a better work-life balance. Because it is so much better for my mental health to, and I'm not saying I did take a pay cut for my work-life balance. I'm just saying I would be willing to, if that was the difference between what I have now and like feeling like I've got to be at the office at 8 a.m. working until 8 p.m. and that I wouldn't get a paycheck otherwise.
Yeah.
And so anything you can do on that front, both you, Ethan, and you, dear listener, who is going to be inspired by our words, always try to check for that. And you could, of course, end up like Ethan, where you have that, and then you don't. So.
Yep.
Anyway. Should we do working on that?
I'll just say I did weigh myself before we recorded. You all know the visual, full nude, right out of the shower, and I mentioned I had gained all of everybody else's lost stress weight because people rely on me, like I said, and I do what I can to save others. So I weighed in, unfortunately, at 200.2. I never wanted to break the 200 threshold again, but I did. So hopefully my new in-office gym membership will do something. And I'm on my feet more out of necessity with regard to obviously I'm not able to use my lunch break like I did at home to go for a jog and make up that time, with the kind of flexibility that I had before. But between the 3 extra days that I'm now going into the office than what I was before, there's the dropping the kids off at school, there's the commute, there's these new meetings that all have to be in person now. So there's a lot more movement than I had before. So yeah.
Good stuff.
What about you?
Yeah. I wasn't stressed from work, but when Christmas season rolled around, I weighed myself right after Christmas, and I was 186 pounds, and that was up about 5 from where I think we had left it in November. I was like right at that 180 mark, and basically, and I told you this in private, but basically, I decided that I was going to, again, think about my mental health, not try to just go on a diet, because I just kind of kept getting exhausted. I found that especially like during season 2 of us always checking in, it was like up a pound, down 2, up 1, kind of back and forth, and like just this meandering slow progress, because I was really close to my goal, but I wasn't there. And so I said, I'm going to go hard and like be as perfect as humanly possible in January, and only January. And then when February rolls around, I'm going to go into maintenance mode, and I'm going to do the same thing in March, because there's more birthdays, more events, more travel. And so by the time February started, I was 179 pounds, and I've been in maintenance mode, changed up a few things, where I stopped previously in 2024 and before, when I counted calories, no matter which app I was using, I tracked my activity as well and counted that burned calories into my daily spend. And what I've done this year, since February, is I just have a fixed calorie goal every single day. And that fixed calorie goal is 2,100 calories, which is about what I think maintenance would be at 170 pounds, right? And that allows me that it doesn't matter how much I move, I am not going to gain weight if I hit my calorie goal. I know I'm not going to gain weight if I hit my calorie goal. I'm not trying to lose weight, but if I move a lot, if I work, like I've started walking the dog every morning, mostly because he needs it, but it's extra steps. I'm biking to and from school 3 days a week, and I'm biking there the 2 other days of the week. Going to the gym, moving around with my kids, and I'm like, all those burned calories on top of 2,100, between my basal metabolic rate and all that good stuff, I'm like, okay, I might lose some weight. And that's how I've lost, 2 extra pounds over the last month. It hasn't been crazy, like half a pound a week kind of stuff. But that's been, that's been a really good mental thing for me, instead of like looking at my calorie app and going 1,600 calories for the day and then working out and seeing the numbers. Like I was getting to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to move around a lot while I'm doing chores so that I can afford to eat like an ounce of Cheez-Its and still be in a deficit. And it just wasn't great. Like I was like, between the different foods I was eating, like getting, I've started making a lot of like high protein, like freezer meals that I can just like heat up and go, and pretty good stuff. And I was like, between like my breakfast overnight oats, I had like a lasagna bowl and like a chicken tikka masala burrito, and then I had dinner, and I was like, I had 4 full meals today, and I was sitting at like right at 2,100 calories, and I was like, okay, I can live with this. Like I feel very satiated and sustained, and maybe I lose a little bit of weight. In April, I may cut my calories back a little bit because I'm not traveling. There's not as many holidays and those kind of things. And having traveled for the next 2 weeks, I'm like, I don't know exactly what that's going to do to my body composition, because I'm not going to have access to a gym for at least the next week. I'll take a deload week and it's fine. But the beauty of it is, with the higher calorie count now and being more in that maintenance mode, is like, that is my maintenance mode for like Sunday when I don't do anything. Like, and so therefore, like, it's like I can eat that number of calories, no guilt, no movement. It does not require me to move to feel okay with that. It's just my daily like 300 calories that I burn from moving around, putting away dishes, getting kids ready, like all that kind of stuff. So tends to work out. So that's what I've been up to, and that's been going pretty well so far. But I think next week, or next episode, I can get into maybe a little bit more of some of the tips and tricks, or that could be a different episode or whatever, that have really helped me, because like I feel like I've had it figured out before for like a week or two. And then like I realized like, okay, this was kind of hard and complicated. And like now I'm in like a better spot where I'm like, I'm kind of cruising, but I'm actively still tracking what I'm doing so that I know what I'm doing, but I'm not doing extra things to like try and sneak calories or not logging something or trying to like go run around in the yard for no other reason than like I'm hungry and I want to justify these calories that I don't have in my budget, and like disordered eating behaviors, to be very blunt about it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I need to jumpstart things, obviously. So to use your blunt term, I need to kick into my disordered eating behaviors for at least a little bit, so I can jumpstart.
I think it's okay to cut. Like I said, I did it for all of January, and I think I might do it again in April if I feel so inclined, depending on how I feel and how my body feels. But I think, especially where you are now, since this is as high as you've ever been, and kind of far away from where you need to be, and it's going to be a many-month journey to get there, like something to mull over. But I would highly consider saying, I'm going to go hard and be perfect for 1 month. And then that feels and then see where you are, right? And then instead of stacking that until you burn out and crash and burn and like yo-yo again, like, I'm not saying that I've solved it for everyone. Sure. I know it's worked for me. It's something to mull over for anyone else that's sort of struggling with it, of like, what if I just went really hard for 1 month? What would, like, if you told me at the beginning of the year that I could guarantee that I would lose 5 pounds this year, or maybe I'd lose 10 pounds because I lost 5 pounds in 1 month in the first half and 5 pounds in 1 month in the second half. Okay, fine. And you do that every year and you kind of stack that. It's sort of, that to me is building more sustainable habits, depending on how you pull those levers, and don't always go into like, oh, I had a bad weekend, time to do a whole month of dieting. Like, but using it as just sort of like, okay, this is my gateway. And then there's something kind of nice about being at maintenance mode, where right now my goal is just like, don't gain weight, not about losing. I'm not where I would ideally like to be. Not that far off, which helps, but like, I'm just trying not to gain weight. And then when I move around a little bit more, I get the added bonus of I lose a little bit of weight. That helps too. Because if you lose half a pound a month, that's 6 pounds in the year. 6 pounds is more than nothing. I'm not saying that's for everybody, but yeah, all food for thought.
Yeah, no, that's some good math.
Something. Yeah. I don't know if it's math. I don't know if it's nutrition. I don't even know if it's science, but it's there.
Hey, you know what it is? It's working on the dad pod.
There we go. All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in for episode 2. I mentioned I will have a couple of resources in the description of this episode that talk a little bit about how that stress that you might be feeling, in case you didn't take it from us, you can take it from some more official sources like Yale. Ever heard of them? About how this can impact your partners, your kids. And if you're feeling stressed, our DMs are always open. I've got a lot more bad dad jokes that I can tell you to try and brighten your day. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for working on the Dad Pod with us. Any resources that we mentioned during the show will be in the show notes. If you have questions, thoughts, or just want to talk with us, the best place is in the comments on YouTube. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads at Working on the Dad Pod, and on Twitter at Working on Dad Pod. Following and subscribing is always appreciated. Please rate and review us. That helps get the show to new people. And if you know a dad who would enjoy our show, sharing it with them is a huge help to them and us. Have a great week.